Hi, I'm Cheryl Butchin, HR consultant, and I'm here today with John Cuellar, and I'd like to introduce you to him on this podcast today. So, John brings a rare combination of technical depth, operational leadership, and enterprise perspective to the conversation. He co-founded SyncHR and led the company through its early growth before serving as chief technology officer for more than a decade, shaping the platform and its impact across complex organizations. Prior to SyncHR, John was the CEO of Harbor Technology Group, a systems integration firm focused on web-based solutions that automated HR process for Fortune 500 companies. The company was successfully acquired by Mellon Financial Corporation, reflecting both its market relevance and execution strength. Earlier in his career, John worked internationally in Eastern Europe with the MBA Enterprise Corp, advising on privatization and M&A efforts, and held roles with Swiss Bank Corporation in derivative pricing, as well as serving as a senior manager with the U.S. Navy. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering with UC Santa Barbara and an MBA from the Haas School of Business at UC Berkeley. He is based in San Francisco and outside of work enjoys snowboarding, surfing, golfing, cycling, and running. Welcome to the podcast today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Cheryl.
It is my pleasure. So that's a very strong background. So I'm going to ask you some questions and we'd love to hear how you perceive them. Thank you.
Sure.
As AI becomes embedded in everyday decision making, what are senior leaders having to unlearn in order to stay effective?
Well, I think the most interesting thing about today's world is that AI is becoming what we call a non-human actor, a player in the organization. And from that perspective, we all have to understand that as leaders, we're not only managing human activity, but we're managing non-human activity. And so that changes things. How do we do that? What are the implications of agents that can act like humans, do things? How do we do the typical leadership type of roles? How do we manage the output? How do we know that we're on track? Are we having performance issues? It's actually true that the same frameworks apply to humans and non-humans actors. And so the difference, though, of course, is that you're not working with an individual, you're working with an agent. But the similar type of frameworks apply. In other words, you have to know about diligence. You have to know about performance and accuracy. You have to make sure that a non-human actor acting on behalf of someone has the right scope, has the right skills, has the right outcomes. So all these things apply, but the tools and the mechanisms change in how we work with what I call non-human actors in the organization.
Great. How do you see leaders over relying on AI versus underutilizing it? And what separates disciplined use from reactive use?
Yeah, I think we're still in a reactive use phase, predominantly in enterprise. I think what is clear to most leaders and most individuals is that AI is a tool, as a web interface, uh, as a companion, if you will, a way to soundboard ideas, do work on an individual's behalf. But in the enterprise, as a acting non-human agent that would do work more sophisticated, we're still in the very, very early stages. I'm not seeing a lot of that actually out there. There's a lot of fear about giving
Yes.
control. If I let that non-human agent do these things, how do I know? How do I know it'll do it the way Sally or Joe did it? How do I do that? What about security, guardrails, safety? What about data leakage, and all kinds of other things come up? So we're in a very early reactive stage here with AI. And I think, I was talking to a friend who went to a co-pilot training in her organization, and it was just that. Here it is. This is how you talk to it. This is the interface that you have. Here's the kinds of questions and answers you can expect to do or get answered. But there was no, this is how we can configure an agent in our workflow, in our process flow to simulate the kind of day-to-day work that someone would do. We're not at that stage.
I don't feel that either. How is AI fundamentally changing work design and capability models across the enterprise, not just making existing processes faster?
Well, I do think there's a lot of work to be done there. That speaks to the senior leadership lab that I'm founding and starting here, where we take real life situations. How do we look at the organization and model what are the opportunities for non-human agents, non-human actors to play a role? Where would we start? And a lot of that is in the analysis of the organization itself based on the information that we have. There's a lot of information in an HRIS system related to organization, employees to organization, job description, job role, job skill. There's also a lot of non-structured data that is floating around, emails, Slack, Teams messaging. All this actually needs to be ingested into kind of an analysis framework to see where the opportunities are. What's going on in the organization? What are the low-hanging fruit items? I don't think we're there yet. I think that we're still, as I said previously, at a very early stage here of understanding how individuals are working with it, not in a process flow scenario or workflow. Or how do we improve getting the work done? There is a lot of opportunity. I think everyone can recognize it, but you can't jump in without some analysis to what's going on in the organization and how is work getting done, and not from an automated way. Let's use the AI tooling to go analyze and come up with what we call some scatter plots and ideas of, well, this group seems to be doing a lot of this exchange with customers in the CRM world. This group is doing a lot of software development over here with this kind of activity. How's sales working with marketing? All these areas need kind of a structure around to see what's going on in the organization that you can actually pick off and say, well, it looks like there's a lot of overlap here. Maybe if we had an agent do this type of work, we could lower the chatter volume, the minutia work here, and make these folks more productive. Without that kind of analysis, it's very scattershot. I don't see it being successful.
That sounds good. What does good governance look like when AI is influencing operational decisions at scale?
Well, governance is kind of what I alluded to before, and that is, what are the guardrails? What's going on? What are the control mechanisms? And because AI is a non-deterministic platform, it can make up its own rules, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's designed to do that. I think that one of the things that I advocate very strongly is to have a very solid foundation in org structure information. Who reports to who? What is the organizational distribution? How the employees relate to those organizational maps, and use that as a governance body, right? So that when an agent is acting on behalf of someone, it knows who the manager is, it knows who the CFO is. This information can be made available to an agent to help with governance. That's how I see governance. There's a lot of discussion about governance out there. I have a particular view based on the security models that I've used for self-service in an organization. What's interesting about this whole AI movement is that it's a new technology to solve an older problem. And the older problem has always been, how do we allow people to do more of their work autonomously, self-service, manager self-service, employee self-service? And we've built up applications and we have forms and we have things like that. But the problem is that forms are in the way. As an employee, filling out a form and doing it right is laborious. I not to do it. So what do I do?
Exactly.
I go back to like a Slack chat and I talk to my manager and I do a natural language and then we get the work done. Well, that's what's interesting about AI now. It's a natural language interface and it's the way people want to work. The only thing you have to solve, or one of the things, is governance and make sure that it has the understanding of how it's playing in the organization. Who is my director, my direct manager? Who are my peers? what organization do I sit in? What are my job requirements? These kinds of things are all kind of structured data that can give an agent the right boundaries on governance. That's a big deal. And I don't think people are quite understanding that side of governance. So that's the way I see it.
It's a very big realm for them to understand. Where do global organizations typically lose control in HRIS, payroll, and workflow ownership? And what does a clean operating model actually look like?
Yeah, this goes back to my previous soliloquy, if I may use that word. The global HR, the global situation with just most companies, right? Because we all have distributed workforces for a variety of reasons, whether it's sales into all the areas of the globe, whether we have some labor pool cost allocation approaches to our delivery model. The challenge there is a combination of centralized information and the requirement for localized processing. And there's not really good systems out there. It's one of the reasons we at Cascade Clear are building a global HRIS application using AI technology to rapidly develop that software. But the point of it all is that you have to have what I talked about earlier. You have to know where they're at, have a relationship being employee to location at a very detailed level in this province, in this city, and that has to be centralized. You have to have a centralized system that has all this global information about employees in organizations, in locations, and where they're at. With that information, you can then apply the same concepts that I mentioned earlier about governance. An agent can react according to that location. One of our partners, Atomic Work, is spending a lot of time on that type of challenge because the flows, the behavior changes. If I'm in Pakistan and I need help with something,
Exactly.
it has to respond differently than I'm in the US. Now, that's easy to say, but what happens as people move around? Is the system at the global level, at the global HRS, is there a structured spot I can go, data spot I can go and ask the question, where is John Doe? Where is Sally Smith? And it has to be accurate, real time, all the time for this to work, which means as people are moving, those transactions that should be facilitated by AI happen very fast. Velocity here matters. Transactions cannot take over a chat forum like Slack or emails 20, 30 days to accomplish because what happens is that the structure of the organization drifts from reality. And once that happens, you're out of luck. You
Okay.
cannot, deploy a non-human agent acting on behalf.
Good to understand. Why do so many organizations still rely on manual handoffs across onboarding, promotions, and offboarding? And what breaks when those aren't automated?
Yeah, well, I think the reality of it is it gets back to the form statement I made earlier. If you're presented with employees in different groups, HR, IT, direct manager, the business process, HR business processing managers, and they have to fill out forms, it breaks down because it's just not intuitive and they want to do natural language. And so it comes out in Slack, it comes out in Teams, it comes out in emails. And that puts a lot of requirement on an individual to be successful, to be expedient in doing the transaction. And that's hard. And that causes drift. And that's why it's out of whack and it doesn't really fulfill the velocity requirement. And once that happens, most people can get the onboarding done real quick because they understand the importance of the experience for the new employee. So it does happen, but it's still fraught with error because it's still real superhuman based and ticket based. And the implication of that is you don't quite capture all the information about the employee, the organization, and the location, and some of these other relationship data that drives governance.
What role does cloud and integration architecture play in actually scaling operations versus just layering technology into broken processes?
Well, cloud is really just a movement from the on-premise client server world into the cloud. And so we have very similar type of things. It's just moved to the cloud.
Okay.
Uh, but the application Salesforce, the Workdays, the HubSpots, these are all cloud applications that used to live inside our organization. Now in the cloud. But they all, what they do is they lead to a siloed view of the organization. Salesforce automation, CRM, Workday, HRIS. I can speak about ticketing, Atlassian, doing software development. And what happens is we still have this friction problem between organizations where the processes are. The processes are inter-organizational. And so that's where AI needs to play. So that's my answer to that.
Okay. If HR and IT were truly aligned as co owners of workforce systems, what would look different in how organizations design, govern, and execute work?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, it turns out if you look at any organization, they'll have an HRIS system and an identity management system in IT. And interestingly enough, they have duplicate structures. In other words, there's a reports to structure in HRIS, there's a report to structure in IT. And if you ask the firm which one is the source of truth, they wouldn't actually know. They would probably lean toward the identity management provider and say IT has a better idea of who's reporting to who. Accurate, but it's pretty close. HR doesn't have it. And so what would change is that would be in sync, right? That would be synchronous. It would be real time. It would be up to date. All the friction would be out of the business process so that governance could be applied from either system. Both of them would have accurate information about hierarchy, about organizational relationship structure. Those would both be aligned. Question is, do you really need it anymore, that overlap? Because at the end of the day, the identity management is to provide access to systems, doesn't need all that org structure. It's subsumed it because of the lack of critical data on the HR side. The HR really wants to do all the people things and should have it. So that goes away in a functioning a non-friction functioning business process between those organizations.
Building?
Agents, and the workforce, HR, IT, the business processes of onboarding, offboarding, the intermovement of people as they change location and get
Right.
promoted. That's a big area. We're also heavily involved with software development using AI agents, Cloud Code. We're developing our global HRIS system, which focuses on tracking compensation changes over time in the currency that they're in with reason codes. This is a big miss out there. You don't have the currency tracking. And because of that, you lose the value of seeing what is the equivalent. How do I make a decision on a promotion or some other salary change if I can't see what the equivalent is in the actual currency? Because that's actually the experience of the employee component of it. The other one that's in the global HRIS system is the localization I talked about earlier. The idea that AI can bring in FMLA for the US, but a Pakistan set of leave rules or a Brazilian set of leave rules and organize the employment status according to those. So you ingest these documents and you apply localization to those kinds of employment leave statuses. And so those two components, along with the org and the location governance structure, is what the global HRIS is about. And then one of our accounts, we're deep into biosignals with wellness and doing some really deep dive science. Yeah. So we're doing some analysis on EEG and which is the brain signal, heart is PPG, and going through an AI ML deep dive unsupervised supervised learning exercise with one of our customers to help them understand how their modality, which is called a mind jam, is affecting other customers and how to make improvements. So that's a very interesting project of ours. That's
That
probably the
sounds
gambit of
very
what we're doing.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing all of that information. Anything else you would like to share with us before we close?
Just a plug for the Senior Leaders Lab. I'll be ramping that up. I'd like to invite you, Cheryl, and I have about another handful of folks that are willing to join, and we can talk about these things in depth. So that's also on our website, and you can go there and register and like that. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for the chat.
Thank you for the invitation. Definitely. And I appreciate you being here and sharing this information with us. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
You too, Cheryl. Thank you.